Hello friends and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'll be your host today, Jared Bronstein, and with all this talk of impeachment going on, we decided to ask the very real question of what if Donald Trump gets impeached tomorrow? Now, of course, personally, I don't think it's going to happen. It takes a lot to get a president impeached, and considering how he's already heading into his third year as president this January, I think if it was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now. But it's still a possibility, and we want to give you guys the answers you may be looking for. Before we go any further, make sure you guys are subscribed and hit that bell to be notified when we post our latest videos. Drop us some comments below with another question you'd like answered, and of course, your thoughts on this video when all is said and done. For those of you who haven't heard or are unaware, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi submitted an impeachment inquiry based on the belief President Trump and his administration put pressure on Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Around the time of this conversation, Trump also froze U.S. military aid to Ukraine before retracting that action and aiding the military shortly after. In July of 2019, an anonymous member of the Intelligence Committee filed a complaint against President Trump regarding the situation, but the Director of National Intelligence refused to send the complaint to Congress due to a law, saying he was told not to do so by the White House and Department of Justice. This led to Nancy Pelosi to file a formal request of impeachment, and following Pelosi's formal request, the status of his impeachment is now in the hands of 6 House committees, who will now investigate Trump and what he's allegedly done. According to the Constitution, for a president to be impeached, they need to be guilty of, I quote, treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, end quote. So as of now, the following 6 committees, Judiciary, Intelligence, Ways and Means, Financial Services, Oversight, and Foreign Affairs, have been and will be continuously trying to find evidence worthy enough to move ahead with impeachment. They will be looking at President Trump's time as president as well as his past and his businesses. If there is enough sufficient evidence, the judiciary will send articles of the impeachment to the full House, who will hold a floor vote based on the evidence provided to them. If the majority of votes are against his impeachment, Trump remains president, and that's the end of that. For the time being at least. If, however, the simple majority votes to impeach him, Trump would be impeached and a trial would begin with the Senate. If the Senate, which is a Republican majority, voted for Trump to be impeached, which would be quite unlikely, Vice President Mike Pence would take over for the remainder of Trump's presidency. What would President Pence mean for the United States and world in general? Well, unfortunately, we can't say for sure unless it actually happens. But based off of popular belief, some seem to think the two are polar opposites. A phrase which was said by a former Pence aide, who believes Pence would bring back a much more predictable, traditional, and reliable Republican in the White House. Now, I think it's safe to say there would be, of course, far less tweeting from Pence. But with that being said, his stance on abortion and gay marriage would most likely remain the same as President Trump's, being against the two. I mean, we really can't forget this is President Trump's right-hand man. So although they are different people, Pence having a long history in politics dating back to the year 2000 when he won a seat in the US House of Representatives, it could be comforting for some. Yet, they also still have a lot of the same policies and beliefs. It's also widely believed Pence would bring politics back to a much more business-like structure, much more calm and precise, compared to President Trump, who is known to tweet about quite literally everything and anything, calling out news stations for slandering his name, and even celebrities who call him out on social medias. Not to say President Trump is doing anything wrong by defending his name, but if you ask me, as president, well, I think he's got bigger fish to fry. Let the Trump supporters argue with those anti-Trump. It's not worth the president's time, especially considering how he's responsible for running one of the world's most powerful countries. It's believed if Pence were to take over, his focus would be more on returning the powers to individual states, which would most likely be bad news for the likes of Medicare, public education, climate change, and civil rights, aside from the abortion topic as well. But we also need to talk about the fate of President Trump if he were to be impeached. Of course, there's the possibility that if he is found guilty of any criminal offenses, he could potentially face jail time, something I think is next to impossible. At his status of power, president or not, he's got so much money, he'll find a way to avoid jail time at the very, very least. So even if he were to be impeached, I strongly believe the worst he'd get is removal from politics and a slap on the wrist. If things do go from bad to worse for President Trump, however, there is the potential possibility that he leaves office, which is what former President Richard Nixon did when he was on the verge of being impeached back in 1974. For now though, it's a wait-and-see type situation. As I previously mentioned, I don't think Trump will be impeached. If anything, he'll leave office before it gets to that point. But I think if that were to happen, it would have happened by now. Regardless of how this plays out though, if Trump isn't impeached and he does run for president in 2020 again, as he's planning on doing, it'll be very interesting to see how it affects the people's vote. Would they want to have another face represent the Republican Party, or are they all still going to stand behind President Trump, who, I think is safe to say, has been the most vocal president when it comes to media slandering his name as well as just people in general. I want to know what you guys think. If President Trump was not impeached and he ran for office again in 2020, would you guys still vote for him, or would you guys want someone else to take over the duties of being the face of the Republican Party? You guys gotta let me know in the comments down below. As always, like I said, I love to hear your thoughts, so guys, please do drop some comments down below with how you think this situation will play out. I do want to say, again, I'm not trying to bash Trump by any means. This is simply just a video explaining what could happen if President Trump was impeached. My personal beliefs don't matter whatsoever. But for now, let's reply to some comments from the video. What if you skydived into a hurricane? Beyond Tubular said, where are we dropping? Me, smirks. That was a Fortnite reference, wasn't it? I haven't played Fortnite for a while, but it'd be pretty cool if they had like hurricanes in Fortnite. Make it harder than it already is. I always get killed right away. It wouldn't make a difference to me. I'm Spleed now, sorry, said, wouldn't it be skydove? So we actually had this conversation in the studio, and I looked it up, and apparently skydove isn't a word. It's skydived, I think, or skydive. The plural of it is not doved, or sorry, the past tense is not dove. I thought it was skydove too. What if you skydove into a hurricane? But apparently it's just, what if you skydived? You learn something new every day, guys. Blue Spirit said, just throw a mannequin. Well, that's not a good option because a mannequin doesn't have organs and blood and motor skills. Like, so many things wouldn't happen in that case. If a human did it, he would try to stay within the eye of the hurricane. If it was a mannequin, who knows where it would go? It wouldn't have any control over whether or not it went in towards, the eye of the hurricane or the wall of the eye. There are so many variables that you would really need a human to do it. You would have to see how it affects their skin, how it affects their, thinking process. I guess be quick on their feet to make sure that, they didn't die, even though it's pretty clear if you skydived into a hurricane, you would die. So you know what? I would just say don't do it in the first place, guys. We don't need to find out. I think we all know it's a bad idea, so why even take it that far? But if you're interested in skydiving into a hurricane, I don't know, bring a camera or something so we could study it. Anyways, guys, on that note, I'm gonna wrap this one up. I've been your host, Jared Bronstein. Like I said, you guys gotta make sure you're subscribed and ring that bell. Of course, drop us some comments down below on whether or not you think President Trump will be impeached, and if he's not, if you guys will still be voting for him in 2020, or if you'd like to see someone else represent the Republican Party. We'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, keep questioning everything, my friends.